Now that we're a little bit more than halfway through the NHL season, we're getting a pretty good look at how the standings are going to shape up at the end of the year. And with a lot of hockey still left to be played, I thought I'd run through all 32 NHL teams and place them in a tier list based on what we can expect from them moving forward. I broke the tier list up into 5 groups, the lowest being Bedard. Teams placed in this tier are the bottom teams in the NHL who have the greatest chance at landing that number 1 overall pick. Moving up the tier list is no man's land. These are the teams that are too bad to make the playoffs, but also too good to win the lottery. Moving up in the tier list is the in the hunt category. These are the teams right on the cusp of the playoffs, and no one really knows if they'll make it or they'll miss it. The playoff lock category are for teams who are obviously going to make the playoffs, it's just a matter of where they place. Lastly, it's the Stanley Cup category. Teams in this category are near the top of the league and have a pretty good chance at making a deep run in the playoffs. Starting in the Bedard tier, I think there's no other team to go to except Columbus. I mean, there's really not much to say. They're the worst team in the league, and after signing Johnny Gaudreau in the offseason, everyone expected them to have a far better season than this. Up next is Chicago. This is another team who's having a very horrible season, but at least this time it was expected. I mean, they really don't have anything going for them, and the best possible outcome of this season is landing that number 1 overall pick. Next is Anaheim, another team where everyone knew was going to be pretty bad. And I don't know if you guys agree with me, but seeing Bedard go to Anaheim would be really cool. Playing with McTavish, Zegras, and Terry would make for a very fun team to watch for a very long time. Following Anaheim is Arizona, and I don't know a single person who wants to see Bedard go here. Hockey in the desert's already dead, and I'm sure Bedard himself doesn't want to spend his entry-level contract playing in Mullet Arena. Next is San Jose, and I really don't have much to say about them. They just suck. Vancouver also finds themselves in this tier, and after a pretty respectable season last year with almost making the playoffs, they don't follow it up at all and are near the bottom of the league. Recent acquisitions of Anthony Beauvillier and Aatu Raty might help them, but I just don't see them doing anything. Rounding out the bottom tier is Montreal, and this is honestly another team I wouldn't mind seeing Bedard go to. With an already amazing young forward core, adding Bedard would just cement themselves as having one of the best futures in the NHL. Moving into no man's land, the first team going here is the St. Louis Blues. All season the Blues have just been mediocre, and at best they're a 500 team, so I don't really see them doing anything this year. Up next is Ottawa, who many people thought were going to be a lot better this year by adding DeBrincat and Giroux in the offseason, but they're still a really young team and they're only up from here. Detroit also finds themselves in this category, and they're a team very similar to Ottawa in terms that they added big pieces in the offseason like Andrew Kopp and Ville Husso, but they're still a very young team and still have lots of ways to go. Next is Philadelphia, and I'm really not sure what's going on here. I mean, they have a few good young pieces, but by no means do they have a bright future, so we'll just have to wait and see what they do. Up next is Florida, and man, I really don't know what happened to these guys. Last year they were a President's Trophy winning team, and now this year they're just middle of the pack. I guess getting rid of Huberdeau and Uyghur was not the answer. Last in this category is the New York Islanders, and although they're just 2 points out, I really don't see them making the playoffs. Maybe the recent acquisition of Bo Horvat can spark a push, but I just don't see it. The first team in the hunt category is going to be Nashville. This is a team that almost always finds themselves in the playoffs somehow, but it might be a little bit harder this year as they're still 3 points out of a playoff spot, but it'll be interesting to see their push. Next is Calgary, and last year they were a very good team, but I think most of that stemmed from them having a Vezina caliber goalie in Jacob Markstrom, and Jacob Markstrom is having a far worse season than last year. Next is Buffalo, and this is a team that I really want to see make the playoffs. They've just been so exciting to watch with Jeff Skinner back to his normal self, Tage Thompson having a monster year, and just an all-around great young core. Next up is LA, and although they're third in the Pacific, I don't think they're a lock for the playoffs by any means, as they have Edmonton and Calgary starting to pick up their games and maybe take their spot. Next up is Pittsburgh, and this is a team you can never count out as long as they have Sidney Crosby. But with teams like Buffalo starting to heat up and maybe take their spot, playoffs are looking a little bleak. The last team in the hunt is Washington, and sort of like Pittsburgh, as long as they have Alex Ovechkin, they'll always be a playoff team. However, with the top 3 in the Metro locked off, they'll have to worry about making a wildcard spot. Starting with the playoff locks is Vegas, and this is really no surprise as they started the year very hot but have since cooled down, but I still think they're a lock for the playoffs. Next is the Wild, and honestly they could either finish third in the Central or in a wildcard spot with Colorado starting to play a lot better, but I guess we'll just have to see. Next is the Rangers, and honestly it's pretty hard to put my bias aside for them considering they're my favorite team, but I do consider them a playoff lock, but I think anything past the first round is not guaranteed with this team. Following the Rangers is a team that went to the Stanley Cup Finals last year in the Tampa Bay Lightning, and many people might be wondering why I don't have them as a Stanley Cup favorite, and I just think there's way too many other good teams to have them up there. Next is Edmonton, and although they've been pretty shaky all year, I don't think you can count anyone out when they have McDavid and Draisaitl as a duo. Next is the Kraken, and if you told me at the beginning of the season that I'd be putting them in the playoff lock spot, I think you'd be lying. They've surprised so many people this year, and I don't see why they can't surprise some more people in the playoffs. And lastly, we have the defending Stanley Cup champions, the Colorado Avalanche. They've had a relatively poor start this season, but this is mainly due to the injury bug that hit around mid-November, where they lost almost all their top six. But now that they're starting to get healthy, I expect them to bounce back pretty soon. Moving into the last category of the Stanley Cup favorites, these are the teams that I believe have a very good shot at winning it, and what other team to start with than the Boston Bruins. The Bruins have been absolutely unreal this year, and I don't see them slowing down anytime soon. It'll just be interesting to see if they keep up the same energy in the playoffs. Next up is Carolina, who is always a hard team to beat at home in the playoffs, so we'll see what they can do this year and hopefully a better result for them than last year. And next, I was reluctant to put them here because I don't know if they're the real deal, but I put the New Jersey Devils here. It's hard to tell if they're the real deal this year, but with Jack Hughes having a career year and Vitek Vanacek playing very well, I wouldn't count them out. After New Jersey, I have Toronto, which is another team people might be a little bit confused on why I have them here considering they've been out of the first round the last couple years, and they're definitely known as the choke artists of the league, but with them having two very solid goalies and their offense staying as lethal as it is, I think they have a very good shot this year. Next I have the Winnipeg Jets, and they've sort of just been quietly very good this year. I'd love to see them make a deep run in the playoffs, and I really think they can, especially with that great whiteout crowd they have during the playoffs. Lastly, for the contenders, I have the Dallas Stars. They've been very, very good this year, and it definitely helps when you have Jason Robertson manning the offense and Jake Ottinger in the cage. Especially after Jake Ottinger's performance last year in the playoffs, I could see them making a very, very deep run. So yeah, that is my mid-season rankings with all 32 NHL teams. Let me know if you guys would change anything or you completely disagree with my list. Also, this is my first time doing this sort of video, so let me know how I did, and comment down below what I should talk about next, and